Hi, I'm Dr. Mila Brujic, and I'm joined with Jim DiBella and Alex Kotelsky from Bausch& Lomb on the science behind the technology on this episode of the Optometric Insights show. Jim, Alex, thank you guys so much for joining me. Oftentimes on our podcast, we try and really kind of bring in the best of the best when it comes to clinical care and some of the insights that they give to us. But I'm so excited and so fortunate to be working with the two of you today because you really bring a unique aspect to this because you guys are both involved in really creating the technologies that we utilize on a daily basis for our patients. But you're going to give us some insights into that. But before we get started and do a deeper dive into that, Jim, we know that you're the head of polymer chemistry at Bausch& Lomb, but tell us a little bit more about what that means and what your role is at Bausch.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, Mila, it's great to see you again, and thanks for having us on. So I have a master's degree in organic chemistry, and I've been with Bausch& Lomb for almost 10 years now, and my primary function is inventing and developing new technologies and new materials that we can use for contact lenses, including being a co-inventor of the infused material we'll talk about today.
I can't even imagine kind of what goes on in your mind on a daily basis to try and make our worlds better and our patients' worlds better too. So, Jim, thank you for all the thought and effort that you put into that. And Alex, you're the medical device engineer. Give us a little bit more on your background and really what that role means at Bausch& Lomb.
Yeah, so I did my PhD in biomedical engineering department and PhD and also postdoc, focusing on biomechanics and mechanobiology of soft tissues. I'm working in the contact lens design department for several years, supporting and leading different R&D projects, including designing different contact lenses.
So that's awesome. I mean, it really sounds like with both of your backgrounds, it sounds like you really take both of those things and you marry them to ultimately provide us with the technologies that you do. And Jim, I'm going to start with you here because I always have wondered, like, where does a contact lens begin, that process at Bausch& Lomb? And more specifically, like, how does the process start? And ultimately, what's that inspiration for that beginning process? If you could just enlighten us, give us a little bit of detail around that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question, and it all really starts with the patient. And we have a really good relationship with our commercial and med affairs teams who are constantly getting feedback from the patient, from the ECPs, and from the literature. And then they feed that information back to us, and it's our job to translate that into the chemistry or the optics to make sure we're meeting the needs of the patient today, and then starting to figure out where we need to go in the future.
I think that's one of the most rewarding things about having a good working relationship with you guys is you're constantly looking at clinical feedback and saying, where are there the gaps and how can we re-engineer, redesign, and rethink these things to actually fill those gaps? And Jim, just for a point of clarification, because Infuse is your newest technology, and that's the one that our patients fortunately get the are the beneficiaries of. I've hit three this morning when I was seeing patients. But is that kind of some of the insights that got you to the infused material and also the infused multifocal?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we always hear, and I know you hear it as well, is comfort is king, right? So that's table stakes for sure. And we're constantly looking at different ways where we can improve the comfort of our lenses. But as you dig a little bit deeper into what we're hearing, you also hear patients want a lens that's easy to handle, so easy to put on and take off. They were asking for lenses with higher moisture, and then maintaining that high oxygen permeability. So for the case of Infuse, to address the comfort, what we wanted to do was make that material softer or drop the modulus down, while making sure, again, it was easy to put on and take off for the patient. So that then when you go to the next step of asking for higher moisture, that to us is increasing water content. So from a chemistry standpoint, that's putting more hydrophilic or water-loving materials into the lens. And then again, when you go to the next point of, hey, we want to maintain the high oxygen permeability, it's interesting because those two things tend to actually go opposite each other. So the more
You know,
moist.
it's funny you say that, Jim, because that's exactly what I was going to say. What I was taught is you can't do both of those things, and you guys figured out how to do that.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one, right? So that's a well-known phenomena, right? So you add water to the lens and you decrease the amount of silicone, or dilute the amount of silicone, let's say. So what we did actually was we leaned on some design of experiments, or DOEs, and used predictive modeling to co-optimize across those various material parameters, and that eventually turned into what became the Calophyll-Con A material.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Now, that material is kind of unique because, and I think the inspiration behind the name of the contact lens infuse was built around some philosophy around understanding the dry workshop to data. Tell us a little bit about that and what that actually meant to the design of this lens.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was gonna be my next point. You hit it right on the head there. Is at the same time, we were getting information from our Med Affairs team with regard to that TFOS DEWS 2 report, and talking about maintaining ocular surface homeostasis. So we had our solutions group was at the same time developing that ProBalance technology. And what we did was we married the two, so the Calophyll-Con A material and the ProBalance solution together, into one material package that we could then turn over to Alex and his team to develop and develop those custom optics to turn it into the product that you guys see.
So that's interesting. That's really interesting, Jim. So is it part of the reason, like, so first and foremost, you said it was a little bit of a softer modulus, and it feels a little bit more like a hydrogel material. People like it because of that as well, too. Clinically, I enjoy it as well, too. But that balance that you're talking about, the material properties, but also when you talk to the scientists about the DEWS too, and those ions that you put in there, is that part of the reason that people are experiencing, like even practically when you're talking to clinicians like us, is that sometimes why people are experiencing more comfort with this lens than we would typically think about for a standard contact lens? Because again, a lot of these people that were putting this lens on, there's very little initial lens awareness. And even as the day goes on, we expect somebody to be aware of a contact lens as the day goes on, but something really is functioning differently with this lens. Is that part of the reason why that may be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So again, making that lens a little bit softer so you don't notice it as much on eye, and then getting that special blend of ingredients from the ProBalance to again maintain that ocular surface homeostasis, or try to minimize the impact on the eye.
Jim, it makes so much sense. I feel like clinically we've just kind of avoided our knowledge of the tear film up to this point. We've just said, hey, come on, let's just make these lenses more comfortable without necessarily any direct kind of input into the homeostasis process on the ocular surface. And I feel like you guys were really intentional about this, which is very, very cool. I think it's part of the reason why we're seeing a lot of what we are with the new lens designs and the multifocal and the infused for astigmatism. They're just high performing lenses. Now, it's interesting when we think about contact lenses. And we think about like all of these different properties. So, Alex, I'm going to throw this question to you. How is one lens kind of able to provide all of that to a patient? And does it have, or how much, I guess, of it is due to the lens design itself, in particular when we're talking about multifocal lens designs as well?
Absolutely. So when we design the lens, first and foremost, our target is to provide the best possible experience for both doctors and their patients. So we implement predictive modeling to identify high-performing lens design optically, but also we want to make sure, we are making sure that the fitting process is pretty straightforward. So when I talk about the predictive modeling, right, in my head is like, I have like 100 different contact lens optical designs
Wow.
that we evaluate computationally. And in all of these simulations, we consider a diversity of patient parameters that we use to optimize the lens performance in terms of for different working distances. And eventually, this efforts culminated in our three-zone progressive design that is currently available on the market. In terms of straightforward process to fit the lenses, patients experience consistent multifocal effect regardless of their distance prescription. We also only offer two designs that can fit the full range of presbyopic patients.
So, Alex, that is so interesting because it's so different than the way clinically we typically approach patients. So we're dealing with one patient and we're dealing with literally the patient that's in our chair, and that's all that we're thinking about. You have the exact opposite thing. You have to think about every single person that we may be putting that lens on and trying to meet the demands of those individuals. It's also interesting too, like when I first saw the low and the high ad design, I thought, well, that's like a non-sophisticated design. And as I started fitting it, I realized the sophistication exists in the simplicity. You guys made it as straightforward for me because of the extra work that you guys put in all of these considerations to make this lens be as almost viable or as kind of as stretching as possible with all of these different patient types. So again, I only have two ad powers, but that's really what I need to meet the demands for most of my patients. Jim, any other thoughts on this, you specifically for the multifocal design?
So the one thing is, as we step away a little bit from our day-to-day job, and Alex and I sit maybe 100 feet apart, it's always nice to kind of take a step back and think about how meticulous that these guys are, and Alex and his team are, with all the materials we create and how much work they put into turning it into the product for you guys. So
yeah, it's we appreciate the work. So don't let my compliments reduce your diligence on the new lenses that you're producing, because what you're doing and the diligence and the level of technical expertise that you guys have is truly showing in the technologies that we're providing our patients. So, Alex, you said the modeling to fit patients into the lens. I always think that that's kind of interesting. And again, it's so much different than we think clinically, because clinically we're very reactionary, but you're almost trying to predict what we might need, and that's got to be a difficult thing. So that's, again, always been kind of an interesting thing to me. Give me a little bit more insights. Tell me a little bit more about what that means, and ultimately, kind of as a scientist, what the variables are that you're thinking about when you're creating this.
Absolutely. So there are different visual factors involved in predictive modeling, and we are evaluating them across different working distances. We're not only looking at, for example, pupil size and subjective refraction, but we're also looking at the ocular aberrations. We're looking at the corneal topography, residual accommodation, axial length, anterior chamber depth. And basically, all of these factors went into this predictive modeling in order to explore different multifocal designs, and eventually where we landed on the three-zone progressive design. So the beauty of these simulations actually is these simulations allow you to shortlist the high-performing designs even before running clinical studies. Of course, we eventually evaluated three-zone progressive design in our clinical studies, and it was great to see how patients read a book from 40 centimeters distance or use their phone from 40 centimeters distance. They're able to work on their laptop from 65 centimeters distance while still maintaining their distance vision. So basically, they have this experience of smooth transition between the near, far, and distance vision. Which was great.
I never realized how much I take for granted, and probably most of our colleagues, how much goes into this, because we expect precision-based technology. We expect everything coming out of that blister pack to be identical and the same every single time. And I think sometimes we take for granted the optical science that's involved in this, because you guys are really taking fit characteristics. I mean, I couldn't even fathom what it takes to create a lens that's going to fit the majority of people. Then you have to make something that's comfortable. Then optically, you have to take an individual who's losing accommodation and give them functionality back. That to me almost seems like an insurmountable mountain to actually get to the top of. Give me insights, Alex, on how this kind of happens. Like, how does this happen where you can put all of this in one technology?
That's a very great question. So in addition to all of these factors that we already talked about, right, we have to think of how we focus the light energy, when we develop the contact lenses, and we do so by the design called simultaneous design, where we split the light energy into different regions, right, into far, intermediate, and near region. But the question is like, how do we split the light energy? How do we know how to split it? And for this, to answer this question, we have to consider visual environment of a patient, right? We use our phones, we work on the laptops, we have digital gadgets. We have to consider brightness intensities. For example, we're driving during the day versus driving during the night. We have to consider contrast environments too. Our ocular aberration can either
Wow.
add or reduce the multifocal effect of our lenses. And also our brain is really, really fascinating. It can even enhance the perceived retinal image quality.
I just splitting the light rays, Alex, was enough of a kind of a mental exercise for me to exhaust me. And now you have to take into consideration all those environmental factors. This it's very clear that you guys were very thoughtful in the design behind this because of the success that we see on a daily basis with this patient. Jim, is there anything else you'd like to add about the contact lens design or feel like we need to talk about with the design of the lens?
So again, I mean, you can hear it from, how much detail Alex and the team put in. And they have to do that for every combination of material and solution we come up with. It comes down, they're going to need to do a custom design. So you can kind of start to think about how much work really does go into these things.
And Alex, anything else that you'd like to add in terms of the design on the infused line of lenses, certainly, but even more specifically, the infused multifocal?
Yeah, first of all, I absolutely agree with Jim. We are really proud to bring these lenses that address patient needs. We are constantly working on next generation contact lens design and material through internal collaboration between contact lens department, polymer chemistry department, and material science and other departments. And also we're collaborating externally with academic institutions. And again, like, I just want to thank you so much for having us. We always love hearing feedback from doctors. It drives innovations at Bausch and Lomb and helps people see better to live better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Thank you.
oh, guys, the thank you is all on this side of the table. I really appreciate this because we rarely in our clinical worlds get to hear from the scientists that are creating the technologies that we're utilizing. So to hear how thoughtful, how meticulous, but also how vetted the process is all the way from inception. I have this idea because of what I'm hearing from people clinically and then creating that path forward, understanding everything that's taken into consideration, eventually going into clinical trials and proving the thoughts, and then giving it to us in a way that's, again, easily delivered to our patients. We're eternally grateful for that. Our patients are eternally grateful. So the one thing that I ask of you both is don't stop being as diligent as you are. Keep pushing the envelope, keep doing great things. I know that our patients and our practices will thank you for it. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for giving me this time on our podcast. Thank you guys for being on.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of the OI Show.